to the injunction request or whatever. And so basically, NASCAR obviously said, no, we don't think you have any like new information. You brought this on yourself, so it's going to go to another hearing about the injunction. So literally just another circle here about the injunction thing. So we've treaded over that before. So really nothing more to say other than that. We'll see what the courts have to say about the injunction deal going forward. But Sammy Smith going to drive the number 8 for Junior Motorsports. It was announced yesterday, and then today they released the actual first paint scheme that we've been able to see from it. The Pilot Flying J paint scheme, which is red, white, and black, Chicago Bulls colors, Budweiser colors, whatever you want to call them. Not reminiscent of any Budweiser car that Junior drove with the number 8 font. And almost immediately, as soon as this news was released, people were split down the middle, kind of. Some people saying that Sammy Smith doesn't deserve to drive that number 8 car. Some people saying, hey, it's just a number. It kind of always jumps into that from time to time. There are certain numbers in the sport that this always hovers around. The number 3, obviously. One of them, some people get super upset. 43 for some people is a tricky number. They want certain people to drive that. Although that one, I haven't seen as much controversy over the 43, at least since the 90s, so much as the 3 and the 8. The 28's a big one. A lot of people, even though people have driven it after Davey Allison, it's still remembered as like Davey Allison's number. And it seems that they don't want anyone else to drive it. I think just to name a couple, Ricky Rudd and Ernie Irvin both drove the 28 as well, with a slightly different font than Davey Allison drove it. But yeah, so 28's another one that's sticky. The 21, but there's some other ones that are historic numbers that people seem to not really get as up in arms about, like the number 21 Wood Brothers. That's a huge one, an all-timer right there, but people don't seem to get up in arms as much about it. But there's two sides to the argument. So the first side of the argument is you've seen that number for a long time. You associate it with a certain driver, and you only want to see either that driver drive it, or somebody with that driver's last name, or somebody that is basically a potential future Hall of Famer. Like in this case, a lot of people wanted Martin Truex Jr. to drive that 8 car. So that's one side of the argument, that you think that number is hollow, and you can't retire numbers, but maybe retire that font. So that's that side of it. The other side of it is, and this is the side personally that I take. This is the poll question, by the way. Do you care that Sammy Smith is running the Dale Jr. number 8 font? Option number 1, he hasn't earned it. Option number 2, it's just a number. Option C, peak offseason equals numbers drama. And option number 4, I thought Dale Jr. drove the number 88. So those are the options in the poll question. But here's where I fall on the numbers issue. And I'll take it back, and that's the reason I mentioned Davey Allison at the top here. There is going to be a whole generation of people who, young kids watching NASCAR, who are never going to remember Davey Allison, because that 28, that font, they will never see that on the racetrack. And in a way, that's kind of a travesty, because Davey Allison was a huge, huge part of NASCAR, a huge reason that the sport grew in the 80s and 90s. Whereas, although people are upset that maybe not the guy they want driving the number 3 car. I'm just going to use the number 3 car here as an example. Maybe not be their, some people might not be their first pick to see Austin Dillon drive that 3. I think it's a good thing that he is driving that 3 for this reason. You see that number 3 out there, and if you're a little kid sees that and says, hey, I like that car, I like that number, you can tell them the backstory of that number, and that way the history is passed on. Like, hey, Austin Dillon's driving it now. I'm glad you like him. I'm glad, he's your favorite driver now. But there was a guy that drove it before Austin Dillon, and then you get to tell them the story of Dale Earnhardt. So it's a way of passing down the history and the legacy of the font of a number and things like that. So I go the opposite direction with it. I like when the number is run in that font, even though it might not be your favorite driver for whatever reason driving it. I think it's a good thing overall, because you extend that history, and you keep those that, in this case, those that aren't with us, you keep them relevant in the sport, even though they're not here anymore. So that's the side I've always taken on it. But to each their own. So it is the poll question. Jump in there, vote on the poll question if you would like to. If not, don't worry about it. Speaking of RCR, RCR has announced a few team moves here. First off, Andy Street is going to be the crew chief of a third part-time car that they're going to run in the Cup Series, and I thought that that was interesting. Chad Haney is going to be the 21 crew chief with Austin Hill, and Danny Stockman is going to be Jesse Love's crew chief. So good crew chiefs there for the Xfinity Series, RCR Xfinity Series, one of the best ones out there. But I like this third car, this third option here that we're going to have in the Cup Series, even though it's going to be part time. Because I think you can see Austin Hill run several races in it, and I think you have an opportunity to put some other drivers in there that you might want to test out. So I think it's a good thing. I like these Project 91 things like that. Put somebody in there. They might not otherwise have a ride or something like that, or just an all-star type deal. So I do like the Project 91 style cars, whatever you want to call them, all-star cars or whatever. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing of note, it doesn't matter what RCR does. People are going to think that the RCR is not doing enough. Here's the deal. RCR did have a down year compared to what they have done previously last season. They did win a race with Austin Dillon, but it was controversial, so they didn't get a playoff bid because of it, the way it ended. But the car was certainly fast enough to win the race, and it did win the race, although people didn't necessarily love the way it was won. But before this season, which was statistically not a great season for RCR relative, the season before that, they did win 3 races with Kyle Busch. The season before that, Tyler Reddick in the same number 8 car won 3 races. So last year was a down year for RCR, but I do feel like they get dogpiled on quite a bit for having one bad year. They had one bad year last year, no doubt about that. But they did have 2 really good years previous to that. So I feel like no matter what they do, they get overly scrutinized for some reason. It's just one of those things. One of the weird anomalies of social media. They sort of get over criticized for every single move they make. At least in my opinion. Your opinion might differ. So we'll see here. The other big news here, got some news from Dodge, and this is going to be sort of a long road to get here, but stick with me. The Stellanis CEO, which Stellanis is the company that owns Dodge, and I saw this here from Jack Fitzgerald at Car and Driver. It was actually announced on December 1st by Stellanis itself, but I saw the article from Jack Fitzgerald. Stellanis CEO Carlos Tavares has abruptly resigned. So a lot to unpack there. I don't really want to get into the nuts and bolts of how Stellanis is run and all that good stuff, but this guy basically took a gamble on electric. This is the guy that I saw an article about this. I can't remember where I saw it though. This is the guy that a lot of people at Dodge blame for killing the Hemi. So in my opinion, him stepping down is a great thing because it breathes hope into Dodge, which is the brand of Stellantis that I'm going to focus on, Dodge and Ram. It breathes some life into them, and it gives them an opportunity because obviously Dodge was talking about getting back into NASCAR a few years ago, but they got cold feet and pulled out because there wasn't enough electrification in NASCAR. Basically, NASCAR didn't get that hybrid engine in the car quick enough for Dodge's taste. So Dodge kind of got cold feet and pulled out because they didn't want to be a part of something that wasn't, or at least Carlos Tavares didn't want to be a part of something that wasn't electrified or, whatever. So with that being said, with him stepping away and backing up, a guy named Tim Kuniskas, who was the former CEO of Dodge, you might remember him as the guy that had the Brotherhood of Muscle. That was the ad campaign that he was most famously associated with when he was CEO. He is now stepped into the CEO role for the Ram brand over there. So I think this could be a good sign for Dodge, not only for the health of their company, but also it's going to give them probably an opportunity to get back into NASCAR if they see it viable, and maybe they bring back the Hemi. A lot of things could happen here rather rapidly as they try to right the ship over there at Stellantis/Dodge/Ram. So I thought that was interesting. But what it also tells us is that at the very most, unless something's going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, like this was a total coup d'etat from Tim Kuniskus, Dodge is probably way further away because I know a lot of people want Dodge back in NASCAR. Dodge is probably way further away from joining up with NASCAR, as some of those reports were mentioning a few years ago, than they have ever been. So at the early 2 years, if they wanted to get into NASCAR, but maybe that's what Steve Phelps was hinting at when he said a few weeks ago, possibly two manufacturers get back into the sport. Maybe Dodge was the other one. But I think that's going to be further out, of course, than the one that is currently rumored, which would be Honda. Honda looks like, for all the money in China, they're the one flirting the hardest with coming to NASCAR right now. And basically, this Dodge information more or less confirms that, is what I'm sort of getting at here. And if you follow sort of the Honda news, of course, big rumors that Honda might leave IndyCar, so that would free up some money, maybe if that happened, to come to NASCAR, or maybe they don't leave IndyCar and they've still just got enough money. They want to dip their toe into the NASCAR deal. So that would be very, very interesting. And the other interesting thing happening with Honda right now is that Nissan is in deep, deep trouble, and they're wanting Honda to buy into Nissan, to stake Nissan so that Nissan can stay alive. If that were to happen, a lot of hypotheticals there, but if that were to happen, one of the benefits that would be for Honda is Honda gets a full size truck chassis, and they also get the Frontier truck chassis where they could just slap the Honda badge on it, slap a Honda engine in it, and run it as a Honda, which would be good for the truck series. Obviously, now they do have the Honda Ridgeline; they could run the Honda Ridgeline in the truck series if Honda wanted to come into the Cup Series. So there's no doubt about it. They do have a truck option, but this would give them an actual uh, frame on body on frame. I said it backwards. Body on frame chassis to get into the truck series. Not that that necessarily matters these days, but you know, some people are sticklers. Some people still remember the old days and how it used to be, and are real sticklers about that. So if that happens, that would give Honda sort of the platform to be in the truck series. So I found that super interesting as well. All right. I think I mentioned everything that I said I was going to talk about at the intro. Let's jump into the chat and see what you guys want to talk about right now. 49% leading the way on the poll question. It's just a number. 24%. He hasn't earned it. 27%. Peak off season equals numbers drama.